Good evening, everyone. My name is Pradna Nagraj, one of the core committee members of the NITI Forum, and I will be your host for the day. I take this opportunity to welcome one and all present over here to the NITI Talks on Constitution by Singhvi, former judge at the Honorable Supreme Court of India. Professor K. Suresh, Chief Executive of JSS Law College Autonomous, Dr. S. Natraju, Principal of JSS Law College Autonomous, senior faculties, and all the participants. The NITI Forum, where experience speaks, is a knowledge-based initiative which aims to serve the participants with efficient and accessible administration of knowledge. Now, I request our beloved Principal, Dr. S. Natraju, to welcome the Chief Guest of the day.
Hello, Namaskara. Good evening, everybody. At the outset, I express my respectful pronouns to Sri Suttur Guru Parampara and seeking the blessings of His Holiness Jagadguru, Sri Shivaratri Deshi Kendra Mahaswami Galavaru, the present Pontiff and the President of JSS Mahavidya Peeta Mysore. Respected guests, invitees, friends, I consider it a privilege to welcome the distinguished speaker of the day and others on this occasion. The NITI Forum is constituted as a part of IKSC initiative of the college with the objectives to have a knowledge-based initiative to serve the students and faculty by efficient and accessible administration of knowledge for all. We started this forum last year and this is the 5th lecture series. It was inaugurated by none other than the Honorable Justice Mr. Kurian Joseph, former Judge of Supreme Court of India, followed by the distinguished speaker delivered lecture on various topics, namely Honorable Justice Chalameshwar, Mr. Justice K.T. Thomas, Professor Madhubhushi C. Acharalu, and Shailesh Gandhi, Advocate, former Central Information Commissioners. Now we have another distinguished speaker and scholar, is none other than Honorable Mr. Justice Sri S.V. Singhvi sir, former Judge of Supreme Court of India, who has kind enough to accept our invitation and is going to speak on the topic Constitutionalism. The concept is a political philosophy which ensures limited form of government and it is antithesis of arbitrary powers. Sir is going to enlighten on this topic. Sir, on behalf of the college, management, staff and students and on my own, I extend a hearty welcome to you, sir. I welcome you, sir. I also welcome our Chief Executive, Professor K. Suresh. I welcome you, sir. I also welcome our faculty members, students, coordinators of this NITI Forum, and all other invitees. Once again, I extend a warm welcome to one and all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Reviewing today's agenda, we will begin by introducing His Lordship, who undeniably requires no introduction, yet will be given by Ms. Nikita. Following the same, His Lordship will grace the occasion with his beneficial words and simultaneously the participants can raise questions. Then, Mr. Suryadev will be called upon to render the vote of thanks. I now request Ms. Nikita Suzanne to introduce His Lordship to the gathering.
Good evening, everybody. I, Nikita Susan Epen, consider it a great honor to be given this opportunity to introduce Honorable Justice G.S. Singhvi to the audience. Ganpat Singhvi, born on 12 December 1948 in Jodhpur, district of Rajasthan, is a former judge of the Supreme Court of India who is well known for his bold but compassionate approach towards the weak and the downtrodden. His Lordship graduated in science in the year 1968 from Jodhpur University and completed LLB with gold medal from Rajasthan University in the year 1971. He started his legal profession under Sri Marudar Mridul in the year 1971. He practiced in the High Court of Rajasthan, mainly in constitutional law, and also conducted several criminal cases as amicus curiae. He represented the state government in special cases and almost all the universities of Rajasthan, various public corporations, educational institutions, and local authorities before the High Court. Justice Singhvi was appointed as the judge of the High Court of Rajasthan in the year 1990 and then as a judge in the Punjab and Haryana High Court in the year 1994. and thereafter as a judge of the High Court of Gujarat in the year 2005. His Lordship was sworn in as the Chief Justice of Andhra Pradesh High Court in the year 2005. He was elevated as the Judge of the Supreme Court of India and assumed office in the year 2007. Some of Lordship's notable judgments are the 2G Spectrum case where, on 2nd February 2012, a bench comprising of His Lordship and Justice A.K. Ganguly squashed 122 2G licenses issued in the year 2008 by terming them as unconstitutional and arbitrary. In the Vehicle Beacon Lights case, His Lordship headed a bench of the Supreme Court dealing with abuse of vehicle beacon lights. During the hearings, the bench stated, "A judge becomes honorable by his judgments and not by using red bacon at the top of his official car." In a judgment on 6 July 2011, the bench headed by His Lordship ordered 156 hectares of land be returned to the farmers, which is acquired by the government. His Lordship retired as the second senior most judge of the Supreme Court of India on 12 December 2013 after a successful tenure of 6 years and 1 month, leaving an incredible imprint as a bold and courageous judge. Justice G.S. Singhvi, after his retirement from the Supreme Court of India in December 2013, was appointed as the chairman of the Competition Appellate Tribunal. He took charge on September 25, 2014 and held the position till 11 December 2016. Today, JSS Law College and the Neeti Forum feels honored to have His Lordship with us.
Thank you, Nikita. We have learned so much from this brief introduction. I can only imagine how much more will we be able to learn today. May I now request His Lordship Justice Kanpat Singh Singhvi to grace the occasion with his valuable diction.
Thank you very much, ma'am. My request to the organizers and the students would be one, that when you call a former judge, please don't use the word honorable. Honorable goes with the person who is sitting in the chair. Once he comes out of the chair, he is an ordinary citizen. While sitting in the court, yes, I represented an institution. Outside, I was an individual, and I continue to be an humble individual, a ordinary citizen of this country. I am highly grateful to the management and the principal and Professor Nair of giving me this opportunity to be with the students to speak on a subject which is very near to my heart, has been near to my heart for last 50 years. Before I commence my small speech, I must compliment the organizers and particularly the college itself to find large number of girl students taking up law and feel convinced, at least till now, that the future of the Indian judicial system, bar as well as bench, is safe in the hands of the younger generation. I wish all the students of the college great success in future. Before coming to the topic of constitutionalism, I would request all the students to go back to their first lesson in the Constitution. The first lesson of the Constitution begins with the preamble. I am sure all of you have been repeatedly given lecture on the preamble of the Constitution. But I again, as a student of law, I continue to be a student of law today. I would request you to again revisit the preamble to understand the idea of constitutionalism in our country. That is fundamental. Even if no other part of the Constitution is necessary except the preamble. You read, we the people of India solemnly resolve to constitute India into a sovereign democratic republic. Please remember the word socialist and secular were added on 3rd of January 1977. Sovereign democratic republic. There, of course, all teachers, my teacher also taught that we are a sovereign democratic republic, fine. But then what? There's a second word, second sentence to that. And to secure to all its citizens. What? Secure to all its citizens. Please read the first line thereafter. Justice. And justice is coupled with the word social, economic and political. All things follow thereafter. And I'm sure your teachers must have taught you why the framers of the Constitution, initially the Constituent Assembly consisted of 300 members. After formation of Muslim League, 66 members left, and we were 240, around 240 who debated for 3 years to bring this wonderful document to us. And to secure to all citizens justice, social, economic and political. That perhaps in my mind is the most important declaration made by the people of India, and that continues to bind the generations, not of 1947, but the generations to come till this constitution survives. Because social inequalities continues to rule this country today also after 75 years of independence. Then we talked of equality of opportunity. Then we talk of equality of status. Then we talked of freedom, freedom in different dimensions. And again, an important aspect of the preamble, which has for over the years been forgotten, is the dignity of individual. When you debate, you must debate today whether in 75 years we have been able to ensure dignity of individual. Then we always, as a student of law, I was also told that part 3 of the Constitution is most important. Fundamental rights. Days are spent in teaching the students what are the fundamental rights. And few hours are spent on teaching what are fundamental duties. I am very amused to find that Parliament had to labor for days together to bring part 4A of the Constitution. But if you read part 3 with part 4, you will find fundamental duties are inherent in the scheme of the Constitution even before part 4A was introduced. And part 3 eloquently talks of equality, irrespective of caste, color, creed, race, region, religion, place of birth, sex. It talks of freedom of speech and expression, freedom to acquire property, freedom to do business, this and that, and so forth. Freedom of religion, faith, education. And then most important, of course, as everybody talks about, and today we are here to debate on Article 32 of the Constitution. Unfortunately, when your professor chose the subject, he omitted to refer to Articles 226 and 227 of the Constitution. As a lawyer and as a judge, I have debated unto myself which is more important, 32 or 226, 227. And my answer, I always found that Article 226 and 227 are not only give more wider power to the high courts across the country, but are more important to the common man. Supreme Court has done under Article 32 a great job in last 75 years, no doubt about it. Not 75, you reduce it by 3 years because it was 1950 that we became a republic and the court came into play its own role. But the high courts have done, if not more, if not greater, equally important work in last 72 years across the country. You are sitting in Karnataka right now. There are people in Kerala, there are people in Northeast. How many of the people of various sections of the society can think of reaching Delhi and invoking the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court under Article 32? That's a matter which you should debate on some other day. But what under Article 32 Supreme Court has done, I will give 2 minutes overview of what the Supreme Court has done in the first decade, second decade, third decade, fourth decade, fifth decade, sixth decade, seventh decade, and now. It all depended. It's not that the Supreme Court as an institution has not been playing an important role. In first decade and second decade, rather first part of the third decade also, the Supreme Court represented a particular class, not the common men. And therefore, there was great protection provided by the Supreme Court to the property of the individuals. You read the judgments of 1950s, right from Chiranjit Lal versus Union of India onwards. You go to 60s, come Henry Golaknath. You come to late 70s, come Privy Purse, bank nationalization. And in 70s come to 80s come to Keshwanand Bharti, then the evolution of the basic structure theory. Those were the days when the Supreme Court comprised of the people who came from the class which is called haves of the society, not have-nots. And that is why more inclination towards protection of the right to property. But gradually there was a shift. And shift became enormous in 1980s and 1990s. And I'm very happy to note that it continues to be so. And the shift came in areas where you could never have thought that the court would intervene. But this intervention started in early 80s. That all of us know, field of environment, ecology, air, water, forests, rivers, lakes, dams. You will find hundreds of orders and judgments of the Supreme Court in these areas. And what you must be, of course, you must be watching the news. And news channels are mostly concentrated in Delhi, therefore they focus on Delhi only. And I am talking on the subject deliberately, air pollution. Air pollution is as if only Delhi is the polluted place in the country. Of course, it is in the 7th year, the Delhi has the distinction of being the most polluted capital in the world. But what about other states in the country, other cities in the country? Same state. And I am very happy to note that high courts across the country have taken upon themselves the task to take suo moto litigation, suo moto action for preserving the health of the people. And another important role which the Supreme Court played by invoking power under Article 32, apart from the freedom of speech and expression to a vast section of the society, was the judgment rendered 4 years ago about abolition of triple talaq. A vast section of the society was freed from the torture of being subjected to triple talaq. I need not debate on the subject at this moment, but what I am emphasizing is that the Supreme Court has played an important role as an organ of the state. Please never confuse the state with the parliament and the executive. The court is an integral part of the state. And there it has been playing an important role as protector of the rights, not only of the citizen, but of the common man, irrespective of caste, color, creed, place of birth. And what the Supreme Court has done is something extraordinary. Your teachers must have taught you about Article 37 of the Constitution, which says that the provisions contained in this part are not enforceable in a court of law. But dear students, I would request you to kindly read each article in part 4 of the Constitution. Read them with each article of part 4A of the Constitution. I would request Professor Nair to read first line of Article 38. Professor Nair, are you able to hear?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Please read first line of Article 38.
Article 38, which speaks about state to secure the social order for the promotion of welfare of the people.
First line, please.
The state shall strive to promote.
State shall. Now go to Article 39, please.
Yes, sir. Article 39, certain principles of policy to be followed by the state. The state shall.
No, state shall. Read Article 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50. The same language, the state shall.
Yes, sir.
Till 1970s, everybody thought that the Supreme Court had no role to play in enforcing Part 4 of the Constitution. Nobody gave importance to the words state shall. And if you read Article 44, you will find something mesmerizing in it. Read for the benefit of the students.
Article 44, Uniform Civil Code for the citizens.
Sorry, not Article 44. Just a minute, please. I will let you know. Article 47.
Article 47. Duty of the state to raise the level of nutrition and the standard of living and to improve public health. The state shall regard the raising of the level of nutrition and the standard of living of its people and the improvement of public health as among its primary duties, and in particular, the state shall endeavor to bring about prohibition of the consumption except for medicinal purposes of intoxicating drinks and of drugs which are injurious to health.
Now the student should think how far in last 75 years the state had performed its duty. Today, perhaps all of you must have read in the papers, I am only repeating it. At least 175,000 children die every year on account of pulmonary diseases caused due to pollution and inhaling of toxic air. The total number of Indians who are killed per annum is 17 lakhs, 1.7 crores. Indian died due to inhaling the toxic air. And but for the intervention of the courts and particularly of the Supreme Court, one does not know what would have happened last year in Corona or the beginning of this year when the oxygen was not available. State dithered in performing its duty regarding public health of the people. The court had to intervene. And executive and the bureaucracy and the legislators, not legislatures, legislators would continue to cry hoax. Courts overstepping their jurisdiction. Our ex-law minister always talked, luckily he's not there now, always talked that the courts have been overstepping their jurisdiction. I would beseech the students to think over if the Supreme Court and the High Courts, or for that reason, every section of the society is a part of the state, whether they are not performing their obligation under Article 47 of the Constitution, or for that reason, under various provisions of Part 4 of the Constitution. You read each article, it mandates the state. And the Supreme Court, I can say with some sense of pride, has read its duty under Part 3 and Part 4 together to protect not only the rights of freedom of speech and expression, right to property, right to religion, right to education of individuals, but of the public at large. Part 4 of the Constitution, in my humble view, is more important to the society as compared to Part 3 of the Constitution. Part 3 represents individuals, Part 4 represents the society, and there the role of the court as the constitutional court of the country is pivotal. And one can always note with great sense of satisfaction that for protecting the individual liberty, for protecting the environment, for protecting ecology, for protecting rivers, the court has played vital role. I will give you an example about the liberty of individuals, how the liberty is played, how the liberty is compromised by the state, and it is across the board. This illustration which I am giving is from the place where I worked as Chief Justice of the High Court in Andhra Pradesh. A letter was sent by a lady, young lady of 27 years. She had been arrested on the charge that she had harbored Maoist. The court, she said that some people came in the night at gunpoint, they forced me to provide food to them. And I did provide food to them. So the police filed a case that she had harbored Maoists. The court could see very easily what is there in it. Granted bail. Granted bail with a surety of 5,000. And sitting in the air-conditioned room, we can never realize that it is impossible for the people in the village to provide surety of 5,000 rupees. So after grant of bail, the lady was in jail for 6 months. And not only 6 months, but was chained in her bed with a chain on her legs. Naturally, as a human or as a judge, one is moved. The suo motu cognizance was taken, notice was issued to the state. The additional advocate general was asked to submit a report within 24 hours. He did submit. So the next query was how many such persons who have been granted bail. And I am not talking of one state. Please keep in mind, this will be applicable across the board in the entire nation. The total number of persons who were in jail after grant of bail was 897. And the period ranged from 3 months to 2 years. The DG Prisons was summoned. He said, sir, I can't help it because they have not fulfilled the conditions of the bail order. In the scenario, immediately came to the mind of the court, what is the meaning of the freedom of speech and expression if you don't have the liberty? What is the meaning of Article 21? Merely because of acute poverty, the people can't afford to provide surety of 5,000 or even 2,000 rupees. By one order, the court directed release of all 897 persons who were in prison after grant of bail, without insisting on surety. One can criticize the court's order by saying that what is this? The law requires that there should be surety. But in a country of 140 crore people, where 43.4 crore people live below poverty line and cannot afford food twice a day, how many of the persons who are falsely accused of committing crime put behind the bars would be able to provide sureties? And what about if their liberty is not there? What is the meaning about them? What is the meaning for them of Part 3 of the Constitution? We will, in our classes and courts, continue to debate over Part 3 and Part 4 of the Constitution. But what is the meaning of that? And there it becomes absolutely imperative for the courts to take suo motu action, whether it is under Article 32 of the Constitution or 226 of the Constitution. I would not take longer time because I am more interested in having questions from the students. That gives me, that enlightens me as a matter of fact, because the questions put by them are more important than the speech. About, and I would admit one thing before I just temporarily close my speech. There have been some aberrations in the working of the courts. And in a country of 140 crores, where 3.5 crore cases remain pending, including in the Supreme Court, about 60,000 cases remain pending. Some aberrations would be there. The society must accept those aberrations, although should not be there theoretically, there should be no aberration. Therefore, while putting questions, you are entitled to ask me about aberrations also. But be mindful, my answer regarding aberrations will be subdued. Therefore, I would conclude my first preliminary speech on one line. The Supreme Court and the High Courts across the country have played important role in protecting the rights of the society, rights of individual, particularly in the area of freedom of speech and expression. And recent order of the Supreme Court is an answer that use of a spy apparatus from Israel for surveillance over the individuals. A very interesting thing which I can share without any hesitation. While we were hearing 2G matter in the court, there were several interested quarters who were watching the proceedings. And one of the senior police officers from IB happened to come to my place. And he said, "Sir, please don't disclose to anybody." At that stage, he wanted secrecy to be maintained. He said that all of you are under surveillance. Your telephones and mobiles are being taped 24 hours. And our answer was, we have nothing to hide, you can tape anything. Even today, you will not know, the students as well as the teachers, that how much they are put under surveillance. And but for the court system, perhaps the rights of the citizens, whether under Part 3 or Part 4, will always be compromised. Thank you very much.
Most of the important provisions of our constitution are borrowed from other constitutions, and yet it is called an ideal one. Why is it so?
Yet it is called?
An ideal constitution.
Yes, perhaps you are mistaken that these provisions of the Constitution are borrowed. My request to all the students and the teachers would be, please tell the students, if you have in your library Framing of the Constitution by B. Shiva Rao. It's a work in 5 volumes. And please get time to go through these 5 volumes or have a glimpse of what is recorded in 5 volumes of the framing of the Constitution. There is nothing like borrowed. Intense debate has taken place over a period of 3 years. There was a subcommittee of the Constituent Assembly comprising of around 60 people who must have held 161 sittings, Constituent Assembly held 118 sittings, debated, and then each provision was revised 10 times before it was adopted. You will find that even preamble of the Constitution as it was originally framed was not adopted, it was modified. I do not want to identify the individuals, but you will find in that volume, 5 volumes of V. Shiva Rao, wonderful speeches, wonderful papers written by very, very elite class of the members of the Constituent Assembly. One particular thing which you must read, irrespective of whether you are reading whether you are reading all 5 volumes of the Constitution or not, please go to volume 5. One letter written, you must be obviously familiar with the name, the first President of India, Dr. Rajendra Prasad. He was also President of the Constituent Assembly. It's a speech given by him on 15th of August 1947, midnight of 14th and 15th of August 1947 to the Constituent Assembly. And his speech has been recorded by him in his own handwriting in Hindi, Hindustani, not Hindi actually. It is Hindustani. Corrected by him. The corrected version has been printed in V. Shiva Rao's Framing of the Constitution in 5th volume. And after going through that letter, you will realize what was the mechanism by which the Constitution was framed and what the greatest visionary of the time, all times I would put it, had said about the freedom and the responsibilities of the people after the freedom. Please go through the same and don't say that we have borrowed the provisions of the Constitution. There is nothing wrong if some good provisions of a particular constitution, say American Constitution, Austrian Constitution, Canadian Constitution, we have adopted in our way, in our own interest. You can't call that the Constitution is borrowed one. Yes, please.
Your
Yes,
Lordship,
please.
Your
Yes.
Lordship, there is one of the questions which has been asked by one of the students. It says that, does the basic feature doctrine make Constitution unreasonably rigid?
Basic feature.
Yes, sir. Does the basic structure doctrine make the Constitution unreasonably rigid?
The Constitution was not rigid at the time of its framing. Constitution did not become rigid merely because the Supreme Court evolved the basic structure theory, nor it would ever become rigid. For the simple reason, if you read opening words of Article 32 of the Constitution and opening words of Article 226 of the Constitution, these are two institutions in the countries which are going to interpret the Constitution in the interest of the public at large. Therefore, the question of rigidity never arises. If you read Article 226, Supreme Court may have some limitation, and Supreme Court can rightly ask the people who directly come to the court under Article 32, please first go to the High Court under Article 226. If you read, the High Court has power. Of course, the prerogative to issue writs like mandamus, habeas corpus, quo warranto, certiorari, etc. They are in the British courts, unwritten constitution. We imported them, no doubt about it. But any other order, direction makes the power of the High Court widest in the country. So the question on if any apprehension that the Constitution become rigid, I think is an illusion.
Moving on to the next question, Your Lordship. It has been asked.
Please
that
don't call me Lordship. Please avoid. I am, of course, elder to you, no doubt about it. But Lordship is a colloquial term which should not be used in the courts also, no longer. We are public servants actually. And if you read Dr. Rajendra Prasad's speech, there is one phrase which has been used, which we forgot, unfortunately. He said, you have ruled the country, you have ruled the people. He was talking about civil servants and army people. You have ruled the country on behalf of a foreign power. Now you should convert yourself into servants of the people. And the judges of the court, for that reason, right from the President of India to anybody else, are nothing more than servants of people. They are given certain privileges, certain facilities to serve the people more efficiently, nothing beyond that. Yes, please. Sorry for this interjection.
No problem, sir. So moving on to the next question, it has been asked, what are your views pertaining to the 1975 emergency in India? And do you think the war was necessary? Do you think the emergency was necessary to have put up?
So far as the imposition of emergency is concerned, that has been now, of course, commented upon to be unconstitutional. At that time, it was upheld because that resulted in suspension of the basic rights of the human being. To that extent, emergency was neither legally justified nor morally justified. It was based on pure political considerations, political opportunism, but one part of it was good. A sense of discipline was instilled in the public at large, which today we are missing. Yes, please.
Okay, sir. So moving on to the next question, there is a question saying, if you were given an opportunity to thank any person for having played an important role in your life or in your journey so far, be it as a person or as a judge, who would it be?
My mother and my wife.
Okay, sir.
And do you know, madam, I would share something with all of you.
Please, sir.
Has any one of you seen the Almighty God? Ask your principal, sir. Has he seen Almighty God?
It's only we believe.
No, all of you have seen. Unfortunately, we do not realize.
Yeah.
The first time you see the God is your mother, who gave you birth, who brought you on this earth. Your parents are the God first. Second is your teacher, who make you a civilized human being. And third is your teacher in the profession, whichever the profession you might be. So at least I always feel I am so lucky I have seen God every time. My parents were God. My teacher was God. My own guru is God. In physical form, he might not be here, but he is omnipresent every time. Yes, please.
Okay, sir. Moving on to the next question. Would you like to share any experience of yours which changed you as a person or made a positive impact on your life?
Yes, working in my law college, my principal was Dr. G.S. Sharma. He is no longer alive. He was our constitutional teacher, and he inspired me to take up the field of constitutional law as my field of practice. And then it was my guru. I can share with you, he was having a communist leaning and always worked as a professional for the poor and downtrodden. I worked with him for about 4 years, and that left the teaching of Dr. Sharma, who also always voiced for the public cause, the poorer sections of the society. They are representatives of the Almighty God. Do you remember why in Hindi we call Daridra Narayan or Dinanath? Because they are true representatives of the Almighty God. So my guru always taught that if a case comes to you and you have to make a choice between a rich man and a poor man, must make a choice with the poor man. And this is what has left an indelible imprint on my mind. And this is why you will find, of course, your teacher will be able to tell you, when it came to land acquisition, it's very easy for the media, for the powerful section of the society, powerful means monetarily powerful section of the society, to say that the land is needed for public purposes, for say construction of highways, aerodromes, railway stations, construction of dams. It's all right. But what about the poor? You must be told about the acquisition of land for Tata Nano cars at Singur, Calcutta. Your teacher will be able to tell, your seniors will be able to tell. 400 acres land was acquired by the government of West Bengal, the then government, not today government. The then government acquired and handed over to Tata. There were several large contracts executed between the government of West Bengal and Tata for setting up plant for manufacture of nano vehicle, right? Cheap vehicle. It's a very attractive for the common Indians living in the cities. Oh, I will have a car, right? And what was the great offer? Each landholder family will be provided one job in the factory. What turned out to be, the one who was the owner of the land became a servant. This what happens in our country with the farmers across the board. They are offered compensation, they are offered jobs. So the one who is master of his own land, he is the owner of his land, he becomes a servant. And this has always impressed upon me that when the court sits there, the court's duty, court's inclination must be not that we violate the constitution, but if two interpretations are possible, one interpretation which goes in favor of the weaker section of the society must be preferred. Yes, please.
Sir, I have a question.
Yes, please.
Sir, there is an increasing tendency on the government that states are not properly implementing the court orders, especially high courts. Some of the state governments are very reluctant to implement the court order, or sometimes they are making inordinate delay in its implementation. Sir, what is your suggestions? And
you are absolutely right, sir. And Dr. Nataraju, you must have come across huge criticism of the court of contempt power, right? Apart from the Contempt of Courts Act 1971 and Article 129 of the Constitution. And of course, your generation will remember that use of contempt power against the Speaker of the Manipur Assembly. You must enlighten the students what happened in that case. Some order was passed by the Supreme Court concerning the proceedings of the Manipur Assembly. They were not liked by the Speaker. So he said that I will not implement the order of the Supreme Court. Supreme Court issued summons twice, thrice, 4 times. The Speaker did not respond. He said, I am not bound by the Supreme Court's order. Ultimately, the Supreme Court had to order the Chief of the Army Staff to send army unit to arrest the Speaker of the Assembly. Once that order was made, the Speaker appeared before the Supreme Court and apologized for not having complied with the court's order. Court is obviously not an opposite party. Court is not a contestant. But what is the duty of the court is that once you have made an order, it is an inherent duty upon you, cast upon you, to ensure that the order is implemented. The orders of the courts are not meant to be put in a frame, a steel frame, put on a wall, and a puja to be performed. They are meant to be implemented. Say, for example, I had the opportunity to deal with a case, and the name of the person you know very well. Across the country it is known, he is Asaram. An interesting case, land was acquired by government of Gujarat for constructing embankment across river Tapi river called Tapi because there was flooding every year and damaging the land of the farmers, crops, etc. So they decided to construct an embankment. After the acquisition was over, the government realized that there is a surplus land. So very good policy decision was taken, returned the proportionate land to the farmers from whom the land had been acquired. Some of the small time farmers, they left because nothing was left with them after acquisition. So they went to Ahmedabad and other places for doing in the search of job. When they came to know about the decision of the government to give back the land, they returned. And they found that one portion of the land has been given over to Mr. Asharam. He had taken the land from the government on the written undertaking that I will do forestation. But he constructed a huge ashram and whatnot. So there was a petition filed in Gujarat High Court. A learned single judge said that this land could not have been allotted to Asharam. So his entire building should be demolished and given back to the farmers. Matter came to the division bench of the High Court. There was a remand. Then a single bench again said the same thing. The division bench this time said, okay, this is right order. So the land should come back to the farmers. The matter traveled to the Supreme Court. Only on one question, the lawyer conceded that, yes, sir, we have misused the land and used it for a purpose for which it was not allotted. So the Supreme Court did not end there. We asked him, give an undertaking that you will return the land within a particular period. The time given was, of course, 1 month. And the court ensured that the land is returned to the farmers in its original form. There is no point in the court making an order which can't be implemented. And there will be one or two aberrations there where the implementation becomes impossible. Else it is the solemn duty of the court to ensure that the court is implemented by use of power under Article 226, Article 32, read with the provisions under the Constitution as well as the Contempt of Courts Act. And this vilification campaign will always go on that the contempt power is being abused by the courts. That the political gimmick which the politicians are entitled to play every time, because that is inconvenient to them. Yes, please.
Thank you, sir. There is a question from one of the students who is asking that in spite of having a strong constitution in the country, certain authorities act according to their whims and fancies. So how to make them accountable for such acts?
You want an answer from the legal point of view or from the point of view of general public?
Legal point of view, sir.
Legal point of view, nobody is above law, including the President of India. Of course, the constitutional protections provided apart. Some protections provided to the judges also, but nobody is above law. And so no member of the civil services could ever think that he is above law. Anybody for that reason he thinks above law is wrong. And the citizens who face the adverse consequences at the hands of the executive, perhaps only one recourse available, though costly, but still available. There have been some cases where on behalf of the public, individuals have moved the court. Students must be apprised of the litigation between 1980 to 1990 by one gentleman, M.C. Mehta, on environmental issues. He took up the cause of the people at large and was able to persuade the court to make orders in larger public interest. So nobody can think that he is above law, whosoever he may be. And of course, I can share with you, I was hardly 1 year old on the bench. There were two persons who were holding the positions of the secretary to the government of Rajasthan. Both of them were secretary to the governor of Rajasthan at different points of time. And in a small matter, a class 4 employee had dared to challenge the termination of his service. The court had found it to be illegal, quashed the termination, ordered that he be reinstated back wages. And that is, as it happened in large number of cases in the country, the bureaucracy would not act upon that. The matter came to the court by way of contempt proceedings. We initially told the additional advocate general, please implement the order. There is no point. Otherwise, our officers will face adverse consequences. He unfortunately did not relent. So the contempt proceedings continued. We heard the arguments. And for the first time in the history of Rajasthan High Court, 2 secretaries to the government were convicted of contempt. And I can say with some sense of confidence, the order was implemented within 24 hours. No court is powerless. Court can always ensure implementation of its order, particularly when it comes to the High Courts and the Supreme Court.
So, and how about the general point when it comes to making them accountable for such acts?
Please, sorry, your voice is breaking, please.
So what about the general perspective or general point on how to make them accountable for such acts?
How to make them accountable?
Yes, sir. So initially you told us about the legal perspective or legal point.
Yes, ma'am. About accountability, it is the political structure of the country which must make the bureaucracy accountable. Primarily not for the court. But if the political structure is unable to ensure accountability of the state apparatus, that means bureaucracy, which unfortunately I am talking because it is riddled with corruption at various levels. And therefore it is difficult to make them accountable. And your teachers will be able to tell you what are the consequences of the state apparatus not being accountable to the public at large. You must be obviously watching TV, reading the newspapers, right? There was, your teacher will be able to tell you what happened in a strip in earlier called West Bengal. They were not called Bengal, it was called West Bengal. West Bengal and Bangladesh. That was called East Pakistan. There is a strip of land which connects erstwhile Bengal with Assam. Old Assam was this 5, there were not 7 states, this was only 1 state, Assam and Nagaland. Nagaland itself was not a state. And that strip came to be known because there were 2 theoreticians called Charu Majumdar and Kanu Sanyal. That strip area, that village name is Naxalbari. And from that the name derived was Naxalite. And the second name given is Maoist. They are all humans basically. They take law into their own hands when they are driven to the wall. Then they are left with no option, that the law will not be able to protect them, the system will not be able to protect them. Then for his own safety of the common man, safety of his own life, the people tend to take law into their own hands. That's not a solution which any person who is a law-abiding citizen would suggest. But then we can condemn that. But at the end of the day, you can't stop that.
Okay, sir. Moving on to the next questions. What are your suggestions that how can the main purpose of constitutionalism be implemented effectively?
This is a very difficult question to be answered. For the simple reason Because I will have to ask you cross question. How many students are in your college?
720.
720 are,
Yeah.
sir, 720 students. Are you able to hear me, sir?
No. Yes,
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
720 lucky students are there. Lucky I call them because they belong to a class who has access to education. What a tragedy in this country that in 1950, the day on which the Constitution was brought into force, 26th the day of January 1950, two things should have been done by the then state apparatus. Compulsory education for all up to class 10 free, irrespective of caste, color, creed, place of birth, race, religion. Of course, the second was free medical aid to every citizen of this country. We failed. We failed to give basic education. Sir, you are better aware than me. When was this Constitution amendment was introduced where the education was, this up to class 10 was made compulsory? 2002, sir.
Yes. Under Article 20.
2002. And implemented when?
2010 by special.
2010. It took 8 years to the state apparatus to implement the most important piece of legislation after independence. Education. If education is not imparted, well, I must confess, without any fear of contradiction, 90% of the people are not at all aware of what is called the Constitution of India. 95%. I would put it 90%, 99%. If you have heard the members of parliament, 70% of them do not know what is Jan Gan Man Adhinayak Jai Hai, because they have not read. If people do not have access to education, then they do not have any access to their constitutional rights. And those who are aware of their constitutional right, if at all 1% population is aware of the Constitution, out of them, that 1%, 99% do not have means to have access to the justice apparatus available in the country. Yes, sir. Anything?
Okay, sir, thank you. Moving on to the next and the last question, which we will be taking here. What would be your message to all the students?
Two things I would like to say. Dear friends, this is a golden opportunity to you of your life, golden I am saying, to equip yourself with the best of education, available education. Do your best. Not that the result would be in your hand. Do your best. And second message be, as a human being and not as a judge, nothing doing with the Supreme Court, etc. Second, the message is, be honest to yourself. There is one message which everybody must take it. In the world, people do wrong things. Sometimes inadvertently, sometimes deliberately. And nobody around him or her would know that he or she has done something wrong, committed something wrong. The society will not know. This material world would not know. But one person would always know. Can you identify that person? The self. The self will always know that I have done something wrong. To the students, I would tell one thing. When you go to sleep, Make an experiment. It's a time-tested experiment. Your soul will come out of you and will convey a message to you, you've done something wrong. It's up to you to take a call and remedy the situation for future. This is the golden time of your life. You will go after doing law. Some of you will become teachers. Of course, that is the second best profession in the world. Apart from doctor, doctor is number one, no comparison to that. Because he saved your physical existence. The teachers make you a civilized human being. The lawyer, etc. come at the third and fourth, fifth places. Don't bother about it. The court judges also come at third and fourth and fifth places. The most important is teacher. Those, because then you will be able to create a new generation of this country, people who will have respect for the constitutional values, who will have respect for the basic values, who will have respect for human dignity. I would request your teachers to tell you what happened in the country in 1950. Sir, Nataraju is here, Dr. Nataraju. Please enlighten your students. I am sure you were born after independence.
Yes.
You were born after independence, right?
Yes.
You must have seen the plight of the people to whom we call scheduled caste in our society. Even today, I was talking to one of the girl student who has just finished law and doing internship here. I was telling, because younger generation do not have any idea of what that particular community had gone through in 1950s, 1960s, and even today. Today, you must be coming across the vehicles provided by the municipal council for collection of the garbage. Right? We feel very happy that we pay 50 rupees or 100 rupees or 200 rupees for collection of the garbage. What the garbage contains, we would not like to talk. Earlier, a section of the society used to carry on their head for 30 years after independence. Shame on this country. Shame on the leaders, shame on the community of this country. Please make your students aware what that plight those people had undergone, so that they become better human beings, more responsive. And the most important thing which even today we must try to achieve, ensure in our society, is dignity of individual. Today also, of course, all theoretization on the TV, etc., rights of the educated female section of the society, fine, very good, good achievement. But what about millions who are still suffering in the remote areas of the country? Andhra Pradesh, I can share an example with you. I was traveling to this some place beyond this Khammam district, which is called Maoist infested area. The protocol officer, protocol magistrate asked me, so sir, would you like to visit? My mother was with me, and therefore there was an attraction to visit that place called Parn Kutir. In history, they say that this is the place from where the Ravan had taken Sita. While we were traveling a distance of 32 kilometers, the judicial officer told me, sir, you can't even imagine the poverty today. That was in 2007. Of course, 14 years have passed by. And people do not have clothes to wear twice a day. If there are two ladies in the house, they will have one sari or two saris. One would remain inside and other will go out after wearing the sari. Other can't afford to come out. That is the extent of poverty. That is the magnitude of indignity inflicted by our society, halves of the society. And therefore, the students of law must learn the first lesson in their life when they read the Constitution. Their first goal in the life should be to ensure dignity of every individual. Every individual, not necessarily a citizen of this country. And the goal of your life should be, we all belong to the class of haves in the society. We all belong, please accept it that we all belong to the haves of the society. We could sit in the air-conditioned chambers during the summer and the heaters during the winter. We can use these air purifiers during air pollution. There are millions and millions of people, including young children, who still do not get bread twice a day. Don't talk of polluted air, toxic water. The interested section of the society has polluted lakes, rivers of this country. Time is yours. You have that opportunity to fight for the dignity of individual after doing your law, to fight for the rights of the common man. And that is giving back to the society. You have got everything from the society. Don't think that your parents have given. It is the society which has given. So you will get opportunity, my young friends. Of course, I am in the 4th phase of my life. You have many phases of life. You will get opportunity to give it back to the society. That is the best thing which you can do, give back to the society, because you get everything from the society. So if any one of them want to ask a question,
Sir.
my email ID is with Professor Nair.
Okay, sir.
Please send those questions on my mail.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
I would be too happy to answer the question.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. It was such a pleasure being a part of the NEETI Forum to have witnessed this day. And JSS Law College and the NEETI Forum both are very grateful to you for having interacted with the participants and clearing the ambiguities. I now request Mr. Surya Dev to render the vote of thanks.
Good evening, everyone. I, Surya Dev R, one of the core committee member of the NEETI Forum, take this opportunity to propose the vote of thanks on behalf of the NEETI Forum and JSS Law College Autonomous. Firstly, I express my heartfelt thanks to Mr. G.S. Singhvi, retired judge, Supreme Court of India, who, in spite of having a busy schedule, graced the occasion with a thought-provoking lecture. I extend my gratitude towards Professor K.S. Suresh, Chief Executive, and Dr. S. Nataraju, Principal, JSS Law College. I also thank Mr. Pranav Kumar Nair and Ms. Neha Jagadish, faculty coordinators of the NEETI Forum, for their guidance and moral support to organize this webinar. I thank Mr. Madhu Kumar, Mr. Arnab Paul, and Mr. Pratyush Saxena for the technical assistance, and all the members of the NEETI Forum for their cooperation and hard work. I also take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you for being a part of this webinar and making it a successful one. Thank you.
Thank you very much, please.
Sir, thank you, sir. Please do visit our college, sir. When you are free, please visit our.
If God gives me this opportunity, I will definitely come.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, please.